Hi, everybody. Buenas noches. My name is Liz Fernandez. I am the Job Fair Administrator for the New York State Association of Independent Schools, Job Fair to Promote Diversity. This year, we will be in person on Saturday, March 4th at Columbia Grammar and Preparatory School. And that will be from 10 to 1:30 in the morning. I am also a previous job fair candidate. It's actually how I ended up within independent schools. So I'm super excited about our time together this evening, and I'm thrilled so many of you have joined, whether you are watching this webinar live or you are watching it, you're watching the recording. We're grateful you're here. I want to remind everyone that pre-registration is currently available, and one of the components is to submit a resume. And that's one of the ways that you complete the process. So make sure that your resume is the document that you want schools to see. It is super helpful for that. And there's a resume webinar that we just did on Sunday that will be available on the website that will give you some helpful tips moving forward. As always, you can email jobfair@nysais.org. That email comes directly to me, and I'm the person who will respond and support you in all ways possible. This evening, our topic is career transitions into independent schools, and we've invited 3 panelists to share a little bit about their previous and current experiences. I'm super excited, and I'm going to invite them to introduce themselves. To those of you that are viewing live, staying on camera is completely optional. We have every respect for your preference. If you do have questions that you would like us to ask live, I invite you to please send those questions directly to me in the chat. I will both integrate your questions into existing questions and also make sure that we have time to listen so that you can get the responses that you seek. And with that, I'm going to invite Manny to begin, and then Mia, and then Jordan, asking you all to introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your career path and where you currently are, and a little bit about your role.
Great, thank you, Liz, and thank you all for taking the time out of a weekday evening to be here and to listen to us. My name is Manny Vega, and I'm the Director of Admissions at the Waldorf School of Garden City. Waldorf is a small independent day school located in Garden City, New York, right in Long Island. And my path to independent schools really, I think, started from my own experience attending one. I was actually selected by a nonprofit organization called the Oliver Scholars Program, and through their support was able to gain admittance into Phillips Exeter Academy, and that experience was a very transformational one for me. So much so that it influenced me into wanting to dovetail my career into, figuring out a way to give back within the independent school realm. But my path there wasn't one that was necessarily traditional. I graduated from my undergrad during the 07-08 market crash. And so my original offer and career choice was in finance. And got my Goldman Sachs offer, which was quickly rescinded. Found myself scrambling, trying to figure out where my passions lied and what I wanted to do, and ended up in sports marketing, and did sports marketing for Major League Baseball for a couple of years, as well as player development with the Miami Marlins. That was great and a wonderful experience, but I realized that I was still wanting to connect with young people and wanting to be in a school setting. And so I ended up returning to work at the Oliver Scholars Program, and worked there for 9 years under various capacities, doing admissions and programming, program development, fundraising, and then from there, transitioned into another nonprofit organization that was also within the educational access space. And so maintained this connection to educational access into independent schools, ultimately finding my way here at Waldorf through the NYSAIS Career Fair. So I'm also a product of the NYSAIS Career Fair, and here to tell you that it works. That's kind of how I found myself here. And I think what's informed my job or my passion really has been in being an advocate. And so I was so long an advocate on the other side and helping students access independent school education. And now am trying to figure out how I can continue to be an advocate from within, specifically within admissions.
Thanks, Manny.
So hi, everyone. My name is Mia Yamada, and I'm the pre and lower school psychologist at Packer Collegiate Institute in Brooklyn Heights. Thanks for being here. So when Liz asked me to join tonight, I kind of paused because it seemed like I haven't been in the field for a very long time, but I have been in psychology forever. And since it was about career transitions, and because I owe my today to the NYSAIS job fair, I was humbled to be invited. And thank you for listening to my journey tonight. So I grew up in California and went to public school most of my life. I had no idea what an independent school was when I came to New York. But when I had my son as a toddler, many people told me how I should be applying to the independent schools, and kind of blew me away that there was this whole world and the whole application process, and even getting into preschool and all of that. So through my son, I was introduced to the independent school system. And at that time, before that, I was working as a psychologist or an educational consultant. We moved places often. So I was in Japan, I was in California, then I moved to New York. So lots of careers in between, and this hopefully is my last career transition because I love being the lower school psychologist. And so because my degree was in human development and psychology, and I had been volunteering at my son's school a lot as part of the PA, doing different committees. I really missed being a psychologist and being with kids, and I wanted to be in the independent school system, primarily because I had seen the system work. Also, being a child psychologist, most of the times that my clients need me is the same hours as my family needs me. So I was trying to put two and two together and have, decide what was going to work for myself and my family. However, because I had not been on the other side as a teacher, I thought in order for my profession to be successful, I wanted to see what it was like to be a teacher. So I decided to go to the job fair. I talked to so many people. It was an absolutely eye-opening and inspirational experience for me. And so many people were talking about their schools, and they obviously have different populations, single sex, co-ed, special needs, all of that. So it was really interesting. And because I had gone to a single sex high school in California for 2 years, and then for college as well, one of the single sex independent schools hired me as a kindergarten teacher. And so I spent 2 years there, and it was phenomenal experience. I learned so much, and I think it was so important for me to see that perspective as because I had been a parent already. I had seen my son as a student, and now I could see the teacher side. And then after 2 years, I decided that I wanted to really search for my psychology position. They're not as, they don't come by as often as faculty positions, but I kept looking and looking, and I was very lucky to be connected to my current school, and here I am.
Thanks, Nina. And
Thank you.
Jordan, you are in a unique predicament, which I actually think is very exciting. I alluded to that when we connected earlier. As you tell your story, what I want those of you listening to know is that there are transitions that happen where there's something in your past and then you step into a new role. And then there's also opportunities depending on what your passion and your discipline or area of talent and skill and interest. There's an opportunity to stay and continue and do both. And so Jordan, I'd love for them to hear your story.
All right, sure. Hi, everybody. Good evening. My name's Jordan Mahone. I teach at the collegiate school. Collegiate school is a K through 12 boys school on the Upper West Side. And I teach, this year I'm teaching all drama classes, not all of the drama classes, but only drama classes in the middle school and upper school. And last year I taught religion and I taught English lit in a private school. In high school, in a private school in New York as well. But most of my background was in public schools. And I'm an artist, I'm an actor and a director. And listening to you guys, maybe I was like, oh, I wasn't going to really explain all of this, but the backstory really is that I was acting. I got out of school and I got a job with a theater company that kind of toured schools. That was my first job out of college. And it was a great experience. We had to do workshops at the school, and I've always loved kids. I'm an older brother, and it just seemed great to be in schools. And an opportunity came along that year. One of the schools needed a director for their middle school play, and I ended up doing it. And so that year of my first professional acting job, I was in schools a lot. And then I moved to Los Angeles and did the table waiting thing as I was becoming, getting my first TV and film roles. And I just, that was fun, but I was still yearning for the schools. And I ended up becoming like doing some subbing in some public schools in Los Angeles. And then ended up, when I came back to New York, that was just, I don't want to wait tables, I want to be affecting change and be in the schools as much as possible. So I would do these long stints in this public school in Brooklyn, just one school. And eventually, my wife and I were like, well, we want to start our family. I am going to just commit to teaching because I love it. And, something Mia said was like, it ended up being like, I don't want to do a play at night where I'm away from my family all night. And on weekends. And it was just it's a perfect transition. But as Liz said, I didn't completely transition. I do still act, I do still direct. And like I'm just blessed to be able to do that in the summers. It's one great thing about teaching. Like you typically have your summers off depending on your role in the school. So I do still get to direct in the schools, and I still get to act professionally in the summers. And so it's great. And now I've been at Collegiate for several years, and it's really nice, depending on your career choice or and your transition, or if you have, one foot into something else that you love, depending on the school, they may really support it. And you may be able to do that. Some obviously want your full commitment and focus, which is understandable. So you have to figure out, if I can do both, and when is that possible? And there are times when I've been able to do both in the summer. So it's still nice to work as an artist, and the school allows me to create with the students, that's such a win-win. So yeah, it's been great.
I love that. And I appreciate everyone's honesty, whether, as Manny said, you had to pivot based on the external circumstances, or, make an adjustment based on some of the life realities of, internal family, or just sort of figure out what's going to work and what's not. So, they say necessity is the mother of all invention. And one of the things that I'm really curious about is, as you were making this transition, what were some of the transferable skills that you really relied on that easily transferred in the past tense or transfer over? And then what were some of the learning curves that you had to adjust to? And as you think about those questions, think about what would be really helpful, because we've got people who are making transitions from the financial world or the corporate world, certainly the nonprofit world. And then there are some that, are going to be making transitions from other areas that we haven't even considered. And so sort of just thinking broadly, what are the skills that you relied on that were transferable, and how did you leverage those? And then what were the skills that you found yourself having to learn in the learning curve? Mia, I'd love to ask you to go first, and then Jordan, please share second, and Manny third.
So some of the skills, well, because I had been in psychology, and my expertise was in children and childhood, and my doctorate was in human development and psychology. All of that, of course, was transferable, and my experience running support groups and group therapy and individual therapy all was very helpful. Working as a consultant in an educational company also was very helpful, because you work on a team, and in a school you work with grade levels, and everybody's a team on your floor, and in the lower school, and because I do preschool as well. So there was a lot of things that transferred. I think that, I don't know if this is coming up in a future question, but I think there was some part of me, and I think that this is a general way of thinking, that teachers have an 8 to 3 job, and then they're finished. But in reality, it's all day, every day, until you have those breaks. And so I think that was a little bit eye-opening for me. It felt like always go, go, go. And because it wasn't something that I was used to, in terms of the pacing and all the different components of people you have to be in touch with, concerned about, planning ahead, all the projects coming up, all of that, prepping. That was a lot of learning for me. It was a learning curve. But I think it's kind of like when you're in any new situation, your brain knows what you're supposed to do, but emotionally, sometimes you can't keep up. And sometimes it felt like that. But I found that the community in the independent schools usually has a mentorship program or something to onboard the new faculty and administrative staff. So that was a really nice place to kind of learn new skills, talk about the challenges that you were having, and I really found that very helpful.
I think for me as a theater artist, the most obvious skills were collaboration. You know, it is such a collaborative effort at these schools between your fellow colleagues, you know, other teachers, between the administration, and of course with your students. And as Mia said, there's so much more going on in the life of that building that doesn't just stay within the confines of 8 to 3. So there's a lot of discussion about, you know, sometimes how the school is to move forward and change, and how it exists now, and how do we best serve our students. And, you know, I'm an advisor in 8th grade, and the upper school faculty advisor for the Student of Color organization. And, you know, that's the expectation as well, I think, in the schools, is that we're there, we love it, we love the students, we do what we can, when we can, and how we can for them. And so you end up in some of these other roles that are outside of your teaching responsibilities. So really, that's what comes to mind when I think about it. And it's something that I try to share with my students in my drama classes, this idea of collaboration and working together. And, you know, some of them play sports and they get it, but it's really a lot about trust and listening and being empathetic, and all of these skills that I feel like you learn as an artist, as a theater artist, and you bring that heart and that compassion to your role as a teacher. But that was mainly, I think, what I held on to in the transition of what to bring to a school setting, you know.
For me, I always thought that being a part of a school meant being part of a community, and so I thought that being a part of the school then therefore meant that I could bring myself. And so much of what I try to do as a member of my school community is bring in parts of myself that I think could really help contribute to the benefit of my colleagues and of the students that I get to interact with. Being in admissions, I found myself not necessarily interacting as much with the current students, but really being outward facing and looking at prospective students. And so I try to figure out how to change that for me. Coming from where I came from in a nonprofit educational access organization, that student interaction was very valuable to me. I know I wanted to keep that and maintain that. And so when I was searching for employment at independent schools, it was important for me to be able to identify the bandwidth that I'd have to be able to do that, and having frank conversations with my higher ups on my intention of doing that. And so, I think bringing yourself, whether that's your cultural representation, my involvement in the Latinx club, or that's my interest in sports and being able to coach baseball this spring, or that's, getting involved in various committees, that allow us to give input, that allow you to give input on school, school culture and other important decisions, I think is something that is very transferable. Bringing yourself is transferable, first of all. I think secondly, from my perspective, coming from a marketing background, I wanted to make sure that I flexed that when I came to admissions. And so, that's, knowledge of like marketing and being able to position the school in a certain way was something that I was able to transfer, use of Excel skills and pivot tables and things like that allowed me to, maybe borrow on some of that marketing, and also early on finance experience has been very valuable in trying to like figure out where the strengths and weaknesses are in our office. And, my first year trying to figure out how I can, have that added value and being able to make my own assessments. And then, I think that those are some of the, and then I think as Jordan mentioned, the collaboration, like being part of that school community, being able to share, thought, be part of thought partnership, whether it's with the student body, or that's with your colleagues, I think it's very big. So having that openness and not just thinking that you're going to come and work in a silo, but really be part of a community and figuring out what parts of yourself you're willing to give to the school, that you're willing to give to the school in general.
Thank you all. One of the things that I want to highlight is that within independent schools, when you hear getting involved in committees or being an advisor or coaching or, additional roles, it might seem particularly overwhelming at first listen. And I also want to highlight that because there are some fundamental differences between independent schools and other kinds of schools, namely class size is significantly smaller in independent schools. Depending on the age, if you are in a lower division or an elementary division, there is likely an additional adult or more in the room. And so smaller class size and additional collaboration in teaching is really fantastic. In middle and upper school roles, there's a department that you work with, and there's a great deal of sharing of resources, particularly if people are teaching multiple sections of the same subject or course, as well as the opportunity to just use one another as thought partners in a lesson or in a leadership conundrum, for instance. So there's lots of ways to really think about independent schools beyond it's one more thing. There are definitely ways to get to know the students. There are some definite fundamental differences with the types of schools and the experience that independent schools provide. And along those lines, we have a question for any of you, whichever one of you feels most comfortable answering this question. How does a transition from a non-teaching background to a teaching role work? So, depending on which of you answers it, just, sort of thinking about making that transition. Who wants to answer the question and offer just their own perspective?
We'll talk about that. From a non-teaching background to a teaching role, how does it work? Maybe I'm not the right one to answer this question. But as I did, well, I started, I guess, as a substitute teacher years and years ago. And I think as long as you have a bachelor's degree, you can sub. So and I was subbing in large public schools in South Central LA. So I really, I was in there doing the work, and it was great in so many ways. But that was really helpful. And then based on your degree and your background, I guess when you transition into independent schools, some people have very little teaching experience. And that's okay. A lot of it is like what they're going to bring to the table, sort of, what Manny was talking about, like, who are you and what are you bringing to the table? How are you going to enrich the lives of our students in this community with your unique background that may not be in teaching? And so that transition sometimes just occurs because the school thinks you'd be a great fit. And yes, starting as a teacher, a lot of, most admin in these schools were teachers. So in terms of I don't know if we're getting to that part of the question, but in terms of upward mobility within the schools, if, administration was something that you were interested in, that often does occur from a position of having been a teacher at some point. And then sometimes people go back to school for a very particular admin track, But I do feel like teachers make the best, or at least former teachers make the best admins.
Anybody else want to address that? And it's totally fine if you don't, because I can certainly speak to it.
I think going from a non-teaching to a teaching career, like Jordan said, I think there are certain systems in place where you're able to learn about the curriculum. A lot of the independent schools share a similar curriculum. They're not 100% the same, but the basis or the foundation is quite similar. So the language is similar, and So once you are onboarded with that curriculum and you work closely with your team, I think you become familiar quickly with the curriculum and teaching. It's a big step, but I also think that it's Manny and Jordan also mentioned that your past experience is so important as a contribution to the classroom or to the faculty, and it's always valued, I feel. And I think that even just the experience of being a mother, um, it kind of opens a door to talk to the parents, right? Because when they say, oh, my child is at 5:30 having a meltdown and I'm trying to get dinner on the table, I totally understand what that means or what it looks like. And, and it's not a result of bad parenting or anything like that, but they feel as though, in front of a teacher, they must have this kind of perfect parenting facade. And once you've had that experience of parenting, you can kind of say it's okay, and and really kind of empathize with some of the things that they're going through at the same time. So I think all of the experiences that you've had will benefit you in becoming a teacher.
Thank you. I would love to add, one of the things that I think is important is when you're making a transition from one field to another, or from one role to another, is to really think about how you present yourself in writing. So having a one size resume that you think fits all positions is not going to work. It's one of the things that I talked about on Sundays, the resume do's and don'ts. You may need multiple resumes. I think that that's an important thing for you to think about. Independent schools love people who can demonstrate interest in working with young people of all ages. And whether that's in a house of worship, in a local youth group, babysitting, work that you did in college or graduate school, ways in which you've been involved in the local Little League or the Scouts program that exists in your community, or whatever it might be. Those are all relevant, and those are important ways to highlight. And I think this is the beauty of a powerful cover letter, because while you may have a resume that speaks to X number of years in finance or X number of years in whatever other industry you've been in, the interest in transitioning to work in an independent school can be explained through an incredibly compelling cover letter that speaks to your interest and passion for working with young people. And that's why I say to people, really take the time to make sure that cover letter and the position in school that you're applying to are reflected and that whoever's reading it really hears your voice and sees you as a value add in the community. I also want to add that leveraging your previous experience and speaking to that. So like Manny spoke about flexing the marketing, he's now in admissions. So public speaking is an essential part of what he does today. And if he were asked, to step into another role, because he's worked with so many different students in a college access program, in more than one college access program, actually, he can speak to the ways in which he has supported young people who are going through all sorts of uneven experiences throughout their young lives, and that's part of what we do as educators working with students. So there are ways to do that. Do not underestimate the impact that a cover letter can have. And I loved what Mia said about so many ways to get information. You will find that the level of collaboration and willingness within and across educators to share materials and resources to bring someone on board is really quite impressive, and it is exciting. And I'm going to transition because there was also some mentions of joining committees and such. And I know that perhaps maybe the first year, the thought is, I just want to survive. Like, I just want to be able to make a transition and really, do a very good job. And that's fantastic. Because you're not required to have teaching certification within independent schools, although elementary schools or primary or early childhood or lower schools, depending on the school, they call it different divisions. There may be different requirements, particularly in middle and upper schools. It is less about your teaching certification and more about what are you able to teach. Where are your passions? What is your major? What is your course of study? What is your lived experience? How can you add to? So we heard Jordan speak to, he is an actor, and he taught religion and English literature in addition to drama courses. So the ability to be flexible and draw and in this day and age, the internet, I'm going to be honest with you, the internet is an incredible resource. You type in lesson plan for pick something and boom, you've got 20 options. So there's lots of ways to get, I think, the information that you seek in order to prepare. And once you're on the inside, ways to collaborate with people and get involved. So I hope that was helpful in the question. And Jordan, I wanted to ask you, we may have some professional artists who are part of this conversation and viewing and sort of thinking about how do they live in the both and. What are some pieces of advice that you would offer professional artists about teaching while continuing to hone in on their craft?
I think about one of the music teachers at my school who continues to play in a band, and those are probably maybe some late nights sometimes, his weekends, but he makes it work. And I feel like as artists, what you need to maintain that sense of self and to feel like you're living in your artistry. For some artists, being in the school is enough. Being able to explore your artistry. I've grown as an artist in the schools as well. So sometimes, it's a different story to direct a high school play and deal with their schedules and what they're bringing to the table as young people. It's different than directing, adult professionals, and it's so helpful and so wonderful to be able to work with young students in that capacity, to work with young people in that capacity and learn from it and figure out how to meet them where they are. But I feel like you have to find what works for you. Like for a while, for me, it was, once a week, working with professional playwrights and reading their new plays, in a setting that was just artists. So though something I was like, I can't do this every night because I'm teaching in the morning, but once a week, I was like, I'm going to allow myself to do that and to just surround myself with these other artists and these professionals who are creating this work on a regular basis. And that was feeding me. And so I think you know yourself well enough to figure out, what do I need to be able to maintain my sense of artistry. And like I was saying, that really comes to mind. There's a math teacher I know who's also an opera singer. And I was just, I asked her just off the cuff, how's what's going on? How's the singing? And she told me later she had kind of put it aside and she was singing, I guess, on Sundays in church or at a church or something. But she's like, that question just made me think, like, I know I'm not doing as much as I want. And so I'm going to find ways to get myself back out there and live and love in that part of myself and that artistry. And so she's doing that. So you, as an artist, you figure it out. But again, I feel like I do know a lot of theater artists who get their joy, all of their joy and their fill of their art by being in the schools. And that is definitely possible by exploring that art with your students. It's like nothing else.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. We have some questions about the hiring process. Can you all think about what candidates can expect from the hiring process, thinking about either, at the job fair itself? There are some schools that already have positions that are posted, and so, applying now in advance of the job fair is something else that candidates might need to think about. And then if you can speak to what the hiring process was like for you, and what candidates can expect during the process, thinking about follow-up, and if you had to do a teaching demo, what did that look like, et cetera.
You're
Manny,
on mute, Liz.
sorry, Manny, can you speak first, and then Mia, and then Jordan? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think the hiring process, of course, as Liz was mentioning, the importance of the resume and the cover letter, I mean, starts there, right? That's usually their first impression. You're uploading these resumes and cover letters sometimes to the portal. Schools are accessing and sifting through resumes to see who maybe they'd like to talk to at the fair. And so just making sure that that's the best representation of who you are, your skills. And I think specifically, I know this is more for the resume workshop, but that you're able to quantify your impact wherever you are, not just simply expressing what you do, but also like what impact did you have and what are the measurables, if any. I think in terms of the hiring process itself, the fair, my experience was I'd been to both, actually, in person and virtual, and I actually got my current position through the virtual fair. So it's a bit different than what you'll probably experience. But in any case, I see it as it being kind of a speed dating situation. You're going table to table or Zoom room to Zoom room, making that first impression each time, trying to figure out how you can connect with the folks that you're talking to. And then like being able to just share a little bit about yourself and what's your value add and what makes you unique and could a potential, positive contributor to their school community. From there, if you hit it off, of course, I think communication and follow-up, and just like making sure that, you are letting them know that you're thinking about their school, that you've thought about the conversations you've had, and then being specific about what you're thinking about is always key, or that's how I like to operate. And so I'm not only just following up to say thank you, but I'm also maybe mentioning one thing that stood out to me in the conversation, and maybe something that I'd like to continue talking about as, they consider me for the next round. In the process itself, I met with the head of school and the admissions team at the fair. They were there. Then from there, I had various interviews with admissions, with school leadership, that spanned from the head of school to department chairs. The admissions team is, of course, communications and marketing team, and then eventually with the board. Some schools that I've applied to, and I've also heard, just like depending on the position, may ask a certain assignment to really kind of show how you handle the work. How do you analyze a data set, or how do you, this is more so speaking from the admissions perspective. I know the teaching one will be different, but some kind of sample of work that they'll then have a conversation with you about in one of the rounds. But I think after each conversation and after each interview, as I mentioned, I think the importance of follow-up is so important, and being specific about that follow-up, and making sure that it seems genuine, that it is genuine, that you're not just simply copying and pasting a thank you note that you wrote to another school person at a different school, but more so just making sure that you're personalizing that conversation, that you're taking notes during those conversations, so that you can recall later on when you're writing these thank you emails or follow-up emails about the specific nuances of your conversation. You can reference that. I think that really speaks volumes to how much you care about who you're talking to and where you're applying to. Yeah.
So I experienced both the Zoom fair and the in-person fair. I found it a little bit more challenging during the in-person, because you're going into a huge gymnasium and there are so many schools represented, and even though you're given a map um, of where everybody is, you sort of start to get lost. And so it was really helpful after each conversation to just kind of jot down who you spoke with, what the conversation was like, and what your feelings were. A lot of schools have different feels and colors, and I think you can really, by talking with the people there, um, get a sense of, oh, this is somewhere that I would really feel comfortable with, or I'm not quite sure, and if I were to pursue this, I would like to ask these kinds of questions, or oh, this school kind of looked at me and sort of dismissed me. And, even though they dismissed you, would you want to continue that conversation and tell them about all the wonderful things that you're bringing to the table? I found it also in the in-person, also in the virtual, that it was helpful to have sort of like an elevator pitch, why you are career switching and what kind of position you would ideally like to have. But at the same time, to keep your options open, because they would often say, well, we don't have that position, but would you be interested in? And just those kinds of making sure that you kind of go over that before you get to the job fair in your mind, so that when you are in that conversation, you have somewhat of your thinking can be relayed to them. I also think when I was in school, how a resume looked is very different from how it looks now, and the information that people are looking for. So probably Liz's channel from Sunday probably will give you a lot of information on updating your resume. For me, I was looking all over the internet because I didn't know that there was such a wonderful panel at NYSAIS, but that could be something that you look for as well. I think, yeah, you meet so many people, so just bring something that you can jot down and take notes for yourself.
Yeah, I think also thinking about, and Liz and everyone's kind of touched on this, like all of your strengths and who you are as a complete person, even if like I run 5Ks sometimes, or I jog for play, maybe, what you're bringing in your direct line of work may also, and again, like Liz was saying, we play many roles, and maybe the first year you wouldn't, and maybe they'd be like, I think something in the, it's opening for a track or cross country coach. And like, that's a passion of yours. Even though I'm an actor, I never, for years, I'm a humanities guy. So what else did you study in college that maybe you minored in science, even though you ended up on Wall Street, So there are things that I think in your past that you can really bring forward. And, history and English was my passion, even as an artist. So that was a good fit for me to be able to teach humanities. And, eventually someone may ask you to do a demo lesson, which is a whole nother world and ball game. What is that like to actually go in front of a class and talk to them and allow them to speak and handle the room and share something in your field or in that particular academic area that you're doing a demo lesson on, and how to research for that. I mean, that's, once you get into the point where you're being hired or being considered to be hired, and as Manny said, who you're meeting, and a little bit about them and what they do, what their role is in the school and how long they've been there. You may meet the head of a department and other potential colleagues in that department, and the head of the the division and the head of the whole school. You know, that has been part of my experience. Once I was interviewing for a job at a school, and the school psychologist was there. There were lots of people in the room that weren't just, you know, my potential teaching colleagues. And I was like, oh, this is great. Like, I'm really getting a feel for who is at the school and what kind of community this is and what matters to them. So just to be ready for those experiences and to meet those people and to bring your true self and everything that like makes you, sounds so corny, but it makes you unique, because schools are looking for, it's like what you tell your students these days. I'm sure some of us, you know, it's like in your area of expertise doesn't make you, or doesn't, it's not the only thing that is appealing. And I tell my students all the time, you know, schools want interesting, well-rounded people, not just someone who gets A's. Like, what else do you do? What do you know, what are your, and it's the same for us, I think. What are we bringing to the table? Like, some people like to cook. And that's like, you know, teachers all are sharing their passions and what makes them unique and special. And that is part of, you know, I think what independent schools especially appreciate. And so, yeah, just knowing those special aspects of yourself and bringing that to the table.
Thank you all so much. I'm going to give you your final question for you all to ponder while I address both a couple of things that you've said and then a couple of questions. So first and foremost, anyone who has already uploaded a resume or has signed up for a webinar and is now interested in attending another webinar, next Monday's webinar, February 13th, is all about transitioning specifically within education, in particular from charter, public, parochial, higher ed schools into independent schools. So I'm inviting everyone to please join us and or view the webinar. You can re-access your resume and make any changes and then upload it. When you registered, you were selected a username and password, so you can always access it. If you have any difficulty, please just email me, jobfair@NYSAIS.org. I am happy to help you. I'm happy to take a look. I'm happy to support you in your process before, on the day of the fair, and certainly after. It's why I'm here, and it's just really important that you feel super prepared. On the subject of preparation, you do not need to know exactly all the schools that are going to be at the job fair on Saturday, March 4th. You will get that information if you pre-register in advance. However, I invite you to go to the NYSAIS website to take a look at the 203 member schools, because I guarantee you a vast majority of the 85 schools that will be present are already on the school's website, already on the NYSAIS website, and you can access their school websites. So, you know, I want that. The question for the three of you to think about, while I close a couple of other loose ends, is what keeps you in these schools? That's your question. What keeps you in these schools? And Mia, I'm going to have you go first, and Jordan second, and Manny, you'll end. As far as teaching demo goes, one of the most important things I will say to you, one common sense tip and one like really important thing. Number one, do not rely on technology. Technology may fail. So have a plan B and a plan C just in case. And two, whatever your lesson plan is, and again, this is something that if you're interested, I can certainly help you. If you get to that stage where you have to do a teaching demo, you can also Google. You can also leverage some of the people that you may know within independent schools as well. People are always willing to help and support and bring people on. When you are preparing your teaching demo, the number one thing, how are you engaging with students? How are you connecting? How are you drawing out? How are you taking a teachable moment, and instead of being so affixed to, I have to get through this and this and this, and instead leverage that moment of connection, because it's really, really important for those people that are observing you. And, you know, if anyone has additional questions, we have a what to expect, another webinar, what to expect from the hiring process. And that's one of the things that we're going to talk about. But I just wanted to address that because I do think it's important. So we've got 5 minutes left together. And I want to make sure that we hear what keeps you in these schools from our panelists before we thank them at the end. So Mia?
So I think getting to do what I love every day, being with the students who teach me every day, all sorts of things, resilience, curiosity, growth, and being with faculty who really care about these students.
Yes, in the independent schools in particular, I mean, I taught in public schools and public charter schools. I've taught in kind of public schools that you test into, so they're kind of like a private school, but work in the DOE. And you know, I've loved my kids everywhere. Like if you love kids, you love kids, and you love working with kids. Something that I think that I do love about independent schools is that you do have a little bit more freedom, because you're not so much part of like the DOE and the structure and the red tape that can go along with that. And so you find a lot of I found a lot of experiential learning, a lot of project-based learning, a lot of being able to, you know, I take my students to plays. I'm able to find ways to enrich their learning without so many constraints, which I think is great. What else? I mean, obviously having so many, everywhere I've worked, you have passionate teachers, I think. But sometimes it feels like the independent schools, there's this sense of camaraderie in making, I feel like you have more of a say and a little bit more input in how the school can grow and change, and be this great place for the students. And that's a really beautiful thing. And yes, it's hard. It's hard to find that in some of the other schools, because they may be just, and don't get me wrong, I'm sure there are very traditional independent schools, but I feel like mostly they want to be progressive and they want to bring in new ideas, and students want to learn in different ways. The parents send them there sometimes because they want them to have more options. And that's something about the independent schools. I think there's sometimes, for better or worse, and it's unfortunate that all schools cannot be that way, but sometimes there are more options and more resources.
Thank you, Jordan. Manny.
I mean, I'll have to repeat some of what was said, in that, you know, on a daily basis, I'm inspired by my colleagues and students, all of whom want to be here, want to foster community, and want to establish you know, progressive ways of thinking and learning. But I think most importantly for me is knowing that, you know, in large part, independent schools, many of which were created centuries ago, weren't established with people of color in mind. And so knowing that, I feel like I'm in a unique position to be able to have a seat at the table, to be able to represent my perspective, and, you know, and be able to support students that look like me. I was, you know, as a student, looking for mentorship, looking for adults that I could look up to who understood my narrative and where I came from. You know, many times couldn't find that back when I was at school. And so knowing that, you know, that's compelled me to want to pursue and to continue pursuing a career in independent school, so that I could have a seat at the table, so I could represent that voice, and so I can uplift that narrative as well. So that's I think my biggest motivator for being here.
Thanks, Manny. Thanks,
Manny,
Jordan. Thanks, Mia.
I just have to second what Manny says. Sorry.
Oh.
Yes, it's something that's really important to me, to be able to be in a school where there are not necessarily a lot of students who look like me, or a lot of teachers who look like me, and to be that support. Because like Manny, I attended one of these schools, and I had no support from anyone who looked like me. They didn't exist. So to exist in these places where students of color really need you, and non-students of color need to see you in these positions as well, it's really one thing that keeps me there. Sorry.
Thank you. I saw the connection and the Me Too from from everybody. So I want to thank Jordan, Mia, and Manny, of course, my colleague Maria, helping us behind the scenes with tech, and all of my colleagues at NYSAIS. I want to thank all of you for attending live or viewing this webinar. And I want to say, you know, what's critically important, get your foot in the door, get yourself, if you are really interested in the opportunities for upward mobility, they do come. In order to really be the strongest candidate for whatever that next leadership position is or that growth opportunity is, once you're on the inside, it is so much easier to make that vertical move. So I'm a huge fan of saying, let's get you in, and then, you know, let's support and find all of the ways to help you to continue to grow, because there's so much opportunities in the form of professional development and just connecting with colleagues to really learn and grow and continue to develop your craft as an educator, whether that's in a teaching, coaching, advising, or leading. You know, as Manny said, get the seat at the table, be part of that, and then take it from there. So with that, I'm going to say thank you, everyone. Buenas noches. We look forward to seeing you future webinars and seeing you ready to pursue a new position on Saturday, March 4th at the job fair. Thanks so much. Have a great evening, everyone. Stay safe and healthy.